Hey guys, Igor here, and I'm back with part 3 of our How to Draw a Cat tutorial series. So let's get into it. We're going to focus on color. Alright, so here I am on the iPad Pro once again, using the Apple Pencil. The first thing that I'm going to want to do is, after opening my image, we're going to hit the little Layers tab and scroll down to Background. Let's choose a color. I decided that I'm going to do a monochromatic painting. That means mainly using one color. Maybe I'll do little hints of, a little bit of variety up in there on the fish or something like that. But for now, I want to do a blue because the camera angle is inside of the aquarium. So let's go for this kind of not fully desaturated lighter blue color. Once we have our color chosen, we can color pick it, create a new layer, and drop it all the way down to the bottom. Tap the layer and hit the fill button. This way we have a background layer selected. I'll even call it background, just, why not? Big, no. Background, there we go. That's the desk outline and whatnot. Okay, so now that we have our background color done, we could, even if we wanted to, theoretically disable the actual background layer. The reason that I create a new layer on top of the background layer is I can actually paint and I can use the adjustments tab. Anytime you press on the background layer, the color option pops up right away. So all you can do is just change the color of that layer. So just a little heads up. Now, create a new layer above our background layer, and here we are going to color things in. We're going to divide objects into a solid fill, and the reason that I do that, as I fill this thing out, I'll talk about it. The reason I do that is you could do everything on one layer, but having the flexibility of dividing these things into their own layers allows you to go into the adjustments tab and tweak, the saturation, the brightness, the contrast, everything without having to sacrifice, the look of your entire image. So if you're happy with one part, you don't have to change it. And as you will see later, it also, dividing these up into separate layers will speed up coloring or adding highlights and shadows. So the brush that I'm using under the brushes tab, round brush, it's not even a modified version, as you can see. The HB pencil I have is modified, but this one is stock. There's a car outside. Sorry if the mic picks up a lot of sounds. I kind of don't have the means of, I don't have access to a studio or anything, so I can't make the sound be too professional. So coloring in the mug, if I want to make sure that I didn't miss anything, it's always nice, it's always a good idea to disable the sketch layer every once in a while so that you can see all of these uneven spaces where I thought I filled them in, but because there was a sketch layer above it, it kind of hid them away from me. So you don't necessarily have to do this. Don't spend too much time on it if it's something like a cup, a mug that isn't really part of the shot. It's more of those things that help tell the story and not necessarily drive the story forward, if that makes sense. So we've got our little mug drawn out. We can enable the line art again for it and just leave it there for now. So now a new layer. I'm going to put this line, this layer 3 that you see right here, is just the table. And I'm going to choose a slightly lighter color for it, just to kind of get it out of the way. Oops. Undo. Alright, going through. So just filling it in with one solid color. It basically does not matter what color you choose. If you choose a gray color, Most of the time, I'll choose a gray color to get the basic idea of what kind of hue or what kind of value I'm applying. So if I wanted a black mug, I would, or like a dark blue mug, I would apply a darker gray. So now we have our, I'm going to do a straight line across. And straight line across the other way. So now we have our little table line filled in the back. I can get rid of the line art because it's just one straight line. I technically do not need it anymore. Now, the cat should be sitting below. I'm going to undo that layer. I don't need it just yet. I'm going to move the cat below the mug because, as you can see, his tail, the mug is overlapping the tail. The tail's behind the mug. So we move the cat below both of the mug layers, create a new layer, drop it underneath the kitty. Now grab, again, whatever color you want. I'm going to go with a slightly lighter gray just so I can see exactly where the line art is, and I don't end up going outside of the lines. Alright, and now I'm going to speed it up and I'm going to fill this guy out all the way, just because there's nothing really to it. All you do is, again, just fill it in within the lines, keep it one solid color. Okay, so one other way you could do this is grab the selection tool. Now you can either roughly or, as precisely as you'd like, fill in the rest of the selection. Make sure that whatever you have selected is what you include in the selection, and then as you saw, all of the outline was, everything outside the selection had those dashed lines, which means that will not be changed. So then I just went into my layers tab, tapped it, and filled it in. So yep, the cat is filled in. Oh, let's get the tail. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go through, and all of the fish will be on one layer. I could, if I really wanted to, I could break it up, but because the fishies aren't really overlapping with one another, it should be okay to put them all on the same layer. So I'm going to go through and I'll speed this up just because it's little things that don't really take any sort of technical difficulty to do. There's no expertise that go into it. I'm going to color the fish on a separate layer, and then I'm going to put the ground for the aquarium on a separate layer as well. So you'll see me do that, but I'm going to fast forward it right now. All right, we are done with filling out all the individual little layers. Here, I'm just going to quickly, yeah, if I disable the fish sketch layer, you can see that the silhouettes are very, very rough right now. All right, let's get into coloring right away, shall we? So what I'm going to want to do, what I'm planning on doing, is creating a new layer above my background, and here I'm just going to use some darker tones to help kind of give the illusion. I'm going to use the Nico Rule brush, and I'm going to create some soft shapes in the background to hopefully make it seem like this cat is in a building, and not only that, but it's also like a nighttime scene, so most of the lights are probably going to be off. You're going to have a few lamps, maybe one above the aquarium, so that the fish can kind of see, and then this cat's curiosity was piqued. So I'm just going to use a rule brush, as you can see here, like a 55%, and a 35%, 55% size and 35% opacity. And I'm just going to block in a darker blue with a bit of tone, or it'll add a bit of texture. Now, using the same brush, let's go in and select a brighter color to go along the top. Let's grab a darker saturated blue. And we're gonna just put in some block shapes. I think the background, I might even blur it a bit. I want a background that's very impressionistic. Okay. So something like this, very almost, if you squint your eyes, then you'll see what it is, but even now you can't really tell. Along the top, we'll do an even lighter color. And I'll do some of the lighter color running down, sort of indicate that maybe the glass is obstructing our vision even further. Grab some darker colors, basically just playing around with this thing until I feel like, oh, okay, this looks like a decent background color. Alright, now we go to our little table. We're going to alpha lock it. Since we're still doing a monochromatic piece, I'm going to stick with the blues, but I want a less saturated one. So if I choose a less saturated blue, that's this color is more of a teal, it's going to push the kind of vibe of this green into a more bluish feeling area, but it won't necessarily mean that the table itself is blue color. It's kind of hard to explain, but it's the same thing as wearing yellow tinted sunglasses. It makes everything look slightly yellow. A red car would look a little bit more orange, I guess, is what my point is. So in the same way, that's what we're kind of trying to do here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take off the alpha lock and still using this rule brush. Some kids, man, kids outside are crazy around here. And I'm going to use a darker color and a small diameter brush, the Nico rule, and I'm going to soften this background table. I want it to be visible, but not too visible. That's the idea. Alright, I think that's good. It doesn't even have to be that straight. I want the background to be almost not noticeable. Let's keep that on a separate layer for now. Why not? So now we get over to our cat. I'm going to quickly grab, actually, first let's choose what kind of color we want on the cat. So over here I can, having the cat layer selected, I can go to, hues and saturation. Because we're on gray, it doesn't even want to choose a specific hue. So instead of that, let's just fill the cat in with a bluish color. Very slightly blue. So pretty desaturated. Again, it's right there on the scale. If you guys are having a tough time keeping up, remember you can always just pause the video. So it's this kind of gray, almost green looking, it feels to me. because of how desaturated it is. But it's definitely not. It's more of a bluish, it's more of a teal color. So filling the cat in entirely, I'm going to go in with a slightly lighter color, slightly more saturation, and I'm going to put it down in places that would be closer to us. Give them a bit of warmth. This way start building up the form of our character here. Now, if I wanted to do a white fur, don't go straight to the white. As you can see now, that looks pretty white because it's in relation to the rest of the cat, and as you can see from the color that I chose, it's pretty far away from being actual white. So you don't have to choose, you don't always have to choose the exact color that you think something is, because more often than not, that's not the right color. Alright, I'm back. I apologize for that. I need to break that little kid's scooter. So annoying. And it's like right under my window as well. They have all this road to write on. Okay, so selecting a few slightly lighter colors to give the whites of the eye a bit more visibility, make them pop a bit more. Then I can use this slightly lighter color to go in and highlight the bottom of the chin, the top of the whisker, cheek thingies. Grab this blue around the neck and go darker. Here we're going to push the form a bit more. We're going to color this cat in quite quickly using this technique, and then we can focus on details and touching up any areas where we feel like, you know, it doesn't look good. I'm going to go even darker. We're going to give the cat a slight color gradation. Not gradation, just a fur pattern. Black ears. Sure, why not? And just darker on all around the edges. His face will be lighter from the lamps that might be above the aquarium. I realized that this painting is kind of situational because, you know, how much different pieces can you apply this kind of cat pose to, but what I really want to show you guys is, you know, it's not that it's not about being able to just draw a cat sitting in one type of position. You have to, or at least personally, I really want to learn how to do, you know, dynamic poses and being able to not rely on, you know, drawing 600 of the same exact cats. I always want to mix it up, and that's my goal, is to hopefully teach you guys the process of how I come up with a pose like this so that you can do it yourself. You can draw your own, you know, 600 all different poses, all different shapes and sizes and colors of cats. I'm going to give them a white tummy, so let's grab this color. It's okay if it's kind of dirty or if it looks kind of dirty. All of that we will fix in a bit. Let's go with an even darker blue color. And again, along the edges. The reason I'm going along the edges is, again, imagine if our light source is basically right here. If it's in front of his nose, pointing directly at him, then the edges of the cat, which would be further away from the light source than the middle point, it would be naturally a little bit darker. And areas like the neck where the fur that's coming from the face would cover up, some of the neck area, and because of that, the neck would be darker as well. So the feet would be quite a bit darker. They're getting a lot less light down there. And as a result, so would the tail. So here what I want to do is I'm going to grab a little bit of pink, but I'm going to desaturate it just a bit. I'm going to use this desaturated pink to put down some initial skin pads on the paws. You can even do a little bit of the nose. Let's grab this darker color and go around the eyes. The reason I'm outlining the eyes is a lot of animals have this kind of weird black skin, like dogs especially, around their eyes or around their mouths. I don't know if it's as common around their eyes too, but that's what we're going to do. Grab this darker color, fill in the eyeballs, and I will demonstrate how I would color the eyes to make them look a little bit more lifelike. But first we just color that in. Grab a smaller brush. We're still using the Nico rule, by the way, and the reason that I haven't switched over is I like the sort of the natural texture that this applies. The brush, I don't have to work extra hard to make something look, let's say, furry or whatever. The reason that I'm not switching over is because I don't need to be precise right now, and not needing to be precise means that I can just focus on coloring things in and making the piece, make sure that it's turning out the way that I intended. Alright, so here we are, just coloring stuff in. Alright, let's see, what's next? So let's go through and color the whole painting very roughly like the cat that you see here. We're going to lock the layer of the mug, grab a, here's what I'm going to do, I'm going to grab a, what color should I make it? Let's go with more of a purple. I'm going to go over lightly once or twice, then grab that slightly lighter color and just fill in the piece. I'm going to unlock the mug, go over the blue area a couple times and pick up the color that I got over there, relock the mug, and now go over with this bluish color. So it basically applies a blue tint to the purple that I just had selected. I'm going to grab a slightly darker, a little bit more saturated color, and I'm going to block in a few shadows for the mug. So the reason that, if you're having trouble choosing colors appropriately, it's generally not a bad idea to choose a darker color that is more saturated, not less saturated. I used to do that before I knew any better. I would grab like, oh, let's do, this type of dark color, and then it starts looking all washed out, when in reality you want to stick to the other side a bit more. And I think that has something to do with, how light interacts with colored objects. It tends to bring out the color more or something along those lines. I don't know exactly. Oh, that's really weird. Can you guys see that? my tools disappeared. I'm going to go back out and into my drawings. Okay, now I have the sliders back. That's kind of weird. Alright, so I'm going to apply some more blue over the entire mug. That's a little too much blue. Not, actually not even over the entire mug, just along the bottom where it'll help show the glass a bit more. But then the top where the purple color of the mug is, it'll still give off that mug feeling. And I'm going to do the same thing for the cat, just add a little bit of blue along the bottom here. I still have to get rid of the line art because, as you can see, if it wasn't fully black, it's doing some weird mixing here and there, which is okay. I'm not worried about that just yet. We're going to go over to our layer 10, which is our aquarium ground layer. And I'm going to grab a brown color. So this brown color, we're going to do the same sort of blue overlay treatment, but what will be different here is we're mainly going for a monochromatic piece. I guess you could say this might be complementary. Whatever, I don't really care. Ah, my sliders are gone once again. And then I hit the selection tool and they come back. Well, I guess that's a discovered glitch. So what I want to do here is grab slightly more vibrant orange that we can sort of show off. Here's me mixing in a little bit of blue into the brown. And I'm running that along the top of the ground because the top of the ground is further away from us than the bottom. You know, this is the foreground. That's generally how it works. So whatever's closest to us will have better lighting because we're closer to the light source. Now that that's done, we can move on to coloring the anchor. Just going to grab some sort of gray color and just rough that in a bit. Let's grab a darker color to help show the areas that'd be shaded. And then let's grab a light color to help highlight the areas that wouldn't be. So just a real quick here, if I remove the line art, you can kind of see it's just very, very loosely dropped in there. And finally, the fish. Here I'm going to grab their actual colors that I would make them. Let's do a blue one there, kind of like an orange one here. Then I'll apply a layer on top of all of them. I'll apply that blue layer that I talked about earlier. Let's have this kind of off-white greenish fish right here. And then let's do like a two-tone. We can do a teal fish, that's fine. Some sort of dark fish. Now we probably want to go lighter, and to contrast you know, what's right behind the little fish, we'll go with an orange color because that will contrast the blue quite a bit since it's complementary. So an orange colored fish there. And an almost white fish down there. And now we can just grab some of this blue, go in, probably grab a hard brush right here under the airbrush tab, get that size all the way up to 100, That's a little too much blue. Let's lower the brush opacity. Let's lower that even more. I want to tint these out just a bit. Probably a bit more, or actually a bit less than I just did. Okay. Now, let's take a quick look at what we have and what we should do. So what we have is removing the line art. As you can see, a lot of the form in the cat is lost, so we need to fix that. And we're just going to start by putting everything together. So the background layer is, and the table, the background walls and the table, I think are fairly safe to just collapse. If we go into, I think it was is it the adjustments tab? There should be perspective blur. I have never used this before. Oh, it's kind of like radial blur in one direction. I'm gonna add a slight. Let's do a 5% blur here. What does this change? Oh, this changes the direction of it. Okay, that's fine. I actually don't even know if it applied. We'll just do a Gaussian blur, which applies to the entire layer. And what I'm applying it to again is the bottom background layer. Just make it a bit more blurry. I'll still go in and clean it up. Right now it's a bit rough, but we can worry about that somewhat later. Now we have our little blue kitten here. Staying on this layer, let's color the eyes in. And the way that I like to draw the eyes is you need to imagine if there's a light source, where are the reflections hitting? So there's two ways I can do this. I can either, I'm going to change my brush over to the round brush once again, but I can either paint on the layer underneath the sketch, or I can create a new layer and paint on both the sketch layer, on top of the sketch layer, and our color layer. And the advantage of this is if you know you're going to collapse your sketch layer into your color layer, then this is a great alternative because you can just clean up edges as you go along. So that's something to consider. Now what I'm doing is I'm putting down a couple of random shapes. So this shape right here, what I just drew, indicates that there's probably a couple of lamps or lights which are pointed down in this direction, and the eye, because it's shiny and see-through and wet and all that, that's what it's reflecting. So I need to figure out, you could just use a dot, which means there's like one little bulb that is shining directly towards the eyes, or if you have an aquarium lamp, it's most likely a bit more square. So if it's more square, you need a longer rectangle, and then you break up, the shape in whatever way you want that you feel will make sense. And a lot of the accuracy behind this has to come from looking at references, where a person is in the bathroom and they're taking a picture and they have one of these square lights right above. So that's probably the most accurate comparison that you could make, and then you can look at that and apply it to your regular painting. So again, we're just going to do kind of a square looking thing there and a square looking thing here. Now keep in mind, if let's say our light source was coming from the left, that means we would light up the left side of the eyeball, and on this eyeball the light source is still coming from here, so it would need to be on the same side. So you don't just flip the eye and put it over here, because that will change up the look of the entire scene. So here we have our eye, but let's not stop there. If we have some little fish in an aquarium that's well lit, we might have some of the colors from the aquarium and the fish bouncing off very lightly to the underside of the pupils here. So if I drop some of these colors down here, and then again, very, very softly, this is probably a bit too visible. If I blend them into the bottom of this iris here, it might help give the feeling of a very reflective, squishy, wet eyeball. And if you alternatively don't have any specific colors like that, you could always have a slight gradient on the eyeball itself. So what I'm doing is I'm going in and just cleaning up the edges here so that the eyeball looks smooth, because we had a really roughed out color. Now if I want, I can grab the outer color. Again, I'm on a layer that's above both the sketch and the paint. So it's essentially, I'm repainting the cat on a completely new layer. So any parts that I don't like here, I can just erase without worrying about touching the sketch layer or the line art. So it's pretty nice. And the only areas, at least for this piece, that I'll focus on is the points of interest. So it's going to be the face of the cat, the paws, and the fish. And then everything else I will kind of just blend together. So the way that I'm going to do this is I'm going to finish the painting, or at least work on it for a while, and then I'll come back and I'll talk about little things that I'm doing. So I'll do a playback, or I'll do an explanation on coloring and drawing maybe a fish or two, and then for all the other fish, I'm just going to speed it up. And I know that you guys don't like missing stuff, but honestly, I don't like having to try to talk for 2 or 3 hours while I'm painting this. So it'll be easier for both of us, I think. So all right, let's do that. Let's fast forward it, and then I will slow it down when I feel like I need to, and talk about things in a little bit more of a detail. Hey guys, real quick, since the video is so long already, I'm just going to throw the detailing coloring part into part 4. So part 3, enjoy, and I'll see you next video.